It's day 3 of OneFinePlay's podcasting Ask Me Anything. I'm James Bishop. We've got a really exciting show coming up, hopefully going to tackle some more really interesting podcasting questions that help you out. Let's get straight into this. So we're back for day 3 of this live stream concept that we decided to start. Seems to be working well. We're getting some really good, great responses. So thanks for sending those in. We've been getting them on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We've also been getting them to our email address, which is live@onefineplay.com. Feel free to contact us there. If you've got a question, you want us to share it on the show. If you don't, that's cool too. We'll just answer privately. And we're getting some great responses. So on Monday's show next week, I'm going to be going through those. Connor, who is in our green room here, is going to compile the questions, and we will, between us, make our way through and answer some of those for you. And then next Tuesday, we're back to having another guest. But on with today's show for now. Today's guest is a friend of mine. We've been making his podcast. It's great. I'll get him to tell you about it in a minute. But Connor, let's bring him in. Tom Fairey from the Back Yourself show. Tom,
hey.
My man, how you doing? How are
great.
you?
Thanks for. I'm good. I've done a bit of exercise this morning, and I feel refreshed and ready. I've just started the Wim Hof method, which I know if anyone who's listening, definitely try it. It's some crazy Danish guy who thinks you can live forever by holding your breath. It's good.
It's all about purging your breath, because holding your breath is all about getting the CO2 out, not the oxygen in. Is that not his mindset?
Yeah, sure. It's something like that. Yeah, but either way, I just know that this guy can run through the Antarctic in just shorts and a pair of trainers. So I want the same skill as that. So I'm just getting myself ready.
Have you seen that David Blaine video where he took those YouTubers and got them to hold their breath for 4 minutes within 30 minutes of practicing?
What? 4 minutes?
I think if you Google, Casey Neistat held his breath underwater for 4.5 minutes after half an hour of practicing. It's all to do with purging your, so you breathe out a lot, and that drives the CO2 out of your bloodstream, and then that allows you to hold your breath for longer. That's essentially how David Blaine managed to hold his breath for 17 minutes.
Well,
when he did it live on Oprah like 15 years ago.
It's incredible. I mean, this show is called, podcast Ask Me Anything. I have asked you just about purging your breath. So I know the theme's podcast. So yeah, it's still interesting.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to mix it up a bit. Thanks for coming on. You have a podcast. The Back Yourself Show.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it. That's all right.
Yeah.
Welcome.
A bit of an interesting story. Well, not an interesting story. I mean, it's not interesting to anyone else apart from me. It got born out of me not knowing anything about startups. So I worked for a really great startup before my current one, and when I started to go out on my own, I just found out that actually I didn't know anything about so many things, like simple questions like, what is the difference between an angel investor or an institutional investor or VC? How should I go out and raise money? What kind of things should be in my pitch deck? Like, when's the right time to raise money? Who should my first hires be? All these kind of problems that I was going through myself at the beginning, I didn't really know the answer to. But luckily, I had lots of great friends within the network who I'd call up and I'd be like, hey, buddy, like, how do I put together a cash flow forecast? How do there's loads of great stuff on the internet, but I'm an auditory learner. Like, I need to listen to someone telling me how to do something to learn. And so I had a conversation with a couple of people, and I thought, you know what, this is really helpful. Maybe I should share this with some other people. So I started doing I decided to go do a podcast. That's not the right web address, by the way. There's no www. But thanks for trying.
You're so demanding.
So anyway,
I'll remove it for you, sir.
No worries. Thank you so much. But yeah, so actually, a funny story about how we met, which people should know about your entrepreneurialism. I was in the White Collar Factory on Old Street Roundabout, and anyone who's connected with startups will know that is the hub of all startup and tech startups in the UK. And we'd hired out a room, and me and one of my co-founders, Andy, we bought some stuff online. We read this thing from this company called Resonate about what podcast kit to buy, how to put it together, and we'd set ourselves up in this studio to do our first one. And this bearded man walks past the room, bangs on the door, and says, "You can't do this in here. I've got a studio upstairs. I'll tell you what, come up and have a go in there and see if you do it any better." And so I went up, and so that was, of course, you. And then so we sacked off all the gear that we'd wasted our money on. Thank you so much for Amazon for your refund policy. And then we went upstairs and started recording. And it's crazy, like how quickly, those kind of questions that you have yourself, everyone else is having as well. And so we went through a process of I just kept inviting on people, friends of mine who were founders, similar stage. And we focus on the really early stage. We're about people who, as back yourself sounds like, I firmly believe that if you have a great idea, you should back yourself and you should go and give it a go. But you need to do it with some education behind you. You don't want to do it with something stupid, and you don't want to make silly mistakes that everyone else is making. And so I invite on people who have been through that journey. But not only that, I also get on investors and VCs who see the journey so often. And we've had some really cool people on. And Carol, sorry, you go.
How many episodes have you made?
I've just done 20, and I've just started season 2, and I have 14 people booked in for interviews already. So it started to pick up. It's really funny the way it works. So you go through, you start off doing a couple and you ask your mates to come on, and you're sort of finding your voice. And then all of a sudden people start asking you to come on. And you're like, wow, I didn't expect that. And then you start asking other people, and people start, some people are like, who are you? Go away. But actually, one thing I will say to the podcast communities, there are so many people out there who are really, I don't want to say charitable, but we had this guy come on, really great friend of mine, Alex Dunstan, incredible guy, a massive LinkedIn and Twitter influencer. And he's just like, yeah, Tom, I'll come on, I'll help you out. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe so many people who are really accommodating like that. So a bit of advice, don't be afraid to ask people.
That links to a question that we had in the first show, which is, should I pay for guests? And no, exactly. That's the challenge, right? You get one big fish, like in your game, you got Alex Dunstan or someone like one of the prolific VC MDs, and then suddenly other people want to come on the show. We've only been making this show. This is episode 3, and I've already had people I reached out to a few people to start with, and yesterday I had 2 people contact me saying, if you need more people, want to someone to come on the show, just let me know. I've got questions, things I want to find out, and they're both people with podcasts and lots of experience. So it's really interesting how it starts to spread.
Yeah.
So how is your podcast? So you've been through the getting it off the ground stage. You've tried recording in a studio. You've tried recording remotely. You've used a production company. You've used freelancers to help you cut the content. What stage are you at now, and what are the biggest challenges?
Yeah, so that's a good question.
This is ask me anything, but now it seems to be ask you anything. But I'm sure you'll turn this. I'm sure you'll have a question for me soon.
Yeah, it's nice to be interviewed actually for once.
Yeah,
the other way around. So interesting question. So the biggest problem I find with podcasting, I say this to anyone, is never underestimate how much time commitment it is. It's more than you think when you begin. And my advice to anyone is try and make sure that you are doing what you're good at. And don't believe in that false economy of thinking, oh, well, I'll do all of the bits I can along this process, try and make it work. When actually there's people who are much more skilled and actually aren't very expensive in relative terms, who can make it so much better and so much more successful. And so I went through that transition of getting myself to the point where I literally just do the interviews. Okay, I do the research for the show. I do the interviews. I have someone who does my show notes. I have someone who does my transcription. I have someone who does I have someone who does the production, who does the cutting, who puts together the graphics for the promotion, who does basically everything. And so we try to get, so there's all those little elements. I try to get all those sorted. So specifically for me, my area is about getting the best advice out of my guests. So prior to every episode, the time where I spend is looking at questions that have come through from my audience. Trying to I do a lot of background research of my guests before they come in to make sure we're asking the right questions.
Have you always done a lot of background research?
Yeah, well, you got to remember that a lot of these people that come on are my friends, so I know them anyway. So it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different.
Nah, but what difference? Like on a serious note, so the reason we're laughing is because Tom recorded his episodes in our studio. I acted as producer. I sat in the corner and watched him try to wing it. And for the first, 10 episodes, they would say something and he would go, you make a good point there, while his brain was trying to think of something else to say. But I think I think what's interesting about planning and the importance of planning, which is a very big flag for me between people who are good and taking it seriously and going to build tell a story with a narrative, and just people who are winging podcasting, is just the process of something as simple as researching your guest for half an hour literally triggers you to think of questions, and then you order those questions, and then it takes this jumbled conversation or interview and turns it into something that's actually more listenable to by the listener. And you definitely have been through that process of, oh yeah, I think I know this person, I'll just guess at some questions and hope that this comes out in the right order, to actually now planning the episodes and writing some stuff down. And you can see a big shift in the quality of the conversation. Hopefully you also find it easier.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's absolutely true. It's interesting. So again, you get lots of feedback about your show and so forth, and people who listen to the show before they come in, and they always say things. One bit of feedback I always get is that it feels very relaxed and you seem very chilled out when you're having it. I always say to people, never underestimate how much preparation it takes to be relaxed. Yep. And because it's like, I'm big into the fight game, and you always relax most in the ring when you're relaxed before you get in there, because you've trained so much more beforehand, so you're ready. And it's exactly the same when you're doing a podcast. Like, the more you prepare, the more relaxed you're going to be when you do it, because you're not going to get stumped with an example. If anyone's looked at the backcast, they'll notice there's been a couple of times when I've thought that someone's invested in a company when they haven't. So that's always good.
And it's a really easy way to impress your guest as well, is if you know stuff about them. I always think back to, before I worked in podcasting, I worked in television, and one of the things that we did would be to research basically famous footballers for TV. We made a TV show about a famous footballer, which was presented by another famous footballer. And in order to do the research, we read every book out there about this player, and then gave that to the host, the interviewer. And we were telling the footballer things about his life that he didn't know and couldn't remember, but because they've been documented in books because he's famous, he was like, oh, that happened to me when I was 17. I don't remember. I can't remember. And it just brings this air of like professionalism to the way you interview, because you suddenly look like you're taking it that bit more seriously. Makes it more interesting, I think. And I think that's a way to get a lot of gain from not a lot of additional time in. Do you have questions that you ask over and over again, like the same question to everyone?
This is really interesting, right? So this is a question for you, because one of the things that people ask me a lot is, well, one of the questions I get asked, I worry about, and one question I ask you all the time is, how do I cope with being? Oh, it's not how do I cope with being so good looking? I don't struggle with it.
No, I didn't think you did. No, go on.
No, serious problem that I worried about, and I know I should get your view on this, is so is it okay to ask the same questions of different guests? And the reason I say that is because although I have subscribers, yeah, and who listen regularly, and I have lots of great fans, and thank you, please, more of you subscribe, and they listen every week. But then I have people who are obviously new because the show's always growing, and those people don't know the answers necessarily, and they're not going to go back and listen to the back catalogue. They're probably going to listen to the most recent one. And some of those questions are still super compelling. And so is it okay to be asking the same questions?
Well, I think the answer to that, especially if you're starting out, is yes. Until you're established, I think it's a really good thing. So I think that one of the things that we probably talked about towards the beginning, and it's one of the first steps that we always take when looking at a podcast concept, is what are the themes that are going to run through every show? So how are you going to link your episodes together? Otherwise, you just have all these individual pieces of content that aren't linked. So you're trying to create familiarity for the listener to your episodes so that they know when they see the Back Yourself show every week, there's always going to be some kind of consistency to what's being talked about. So Joe Rogan is a horrendous example because he's become so famous and so good that he can basically talk about whatever he wants. Did you know, going off topic, but we'll come back, someone told me yesterday he spends all day with a guest. So he records in the evening, but he gets them to come in the day. They spend all day hanging out, like he's got like guns and all sorts of stuff in his warehouse. And then they record at the very end of the day. Was it you who told me that?
I know, but I knew that. Yeah, it's really interesting.
But
he goes for dinner
totally,
as well.
Yeah, totally changes the relationship with the guest. But if you're not, not everyone has that choice, and he's a bad example because he draws so much attention. But like, even we would make the podcast for Ross Kemp, and when they first came to us with the idea of the show, he was like, "Well, I'm just going to interview interesting people." I was like, "Okay, that's cool, but it's got no correlation to you, and the listener's not going to know why. What are the specifics? What's the niche or the specialism within your show?" So we linked every one of the episodes together by him saying at the end or somewhere in every episode, "Tell me about the toughest moment in your life that you've had to overcome." Because he's known for tough situations. Like, he didn't want to make a show that was just, all about the things he's been so well known for to date. But it did need consistency, and so this fitted. So in every episode, he asks them that question. We make another show called Fear Itself. Every episode starts with the person saying, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and my biggest fear is X." So you know that you've got all these different people across the season, but they're all linked through this one theme, basically. It's a little bit like marketing textbook to say it, but what's your North Star? And if you've got a question linked around your North Star, then I think that's good. That's interesting. But it's got to be enough to keep people going. Another thing people do, which is quite a smart idea, is listeners like podcasting is something that you tend to do alone. There aren't that many things that you do alone, but it is one of them. You don't listen to podcasts with your mates, so as it would be weird, right? So what happens is you become a fan of a show. Have you had any of your fans come up to you yet?
I have a lot of people. No, but I have a lot of people message me on LinkedIn.
And actually, I want to come on to that in a minute because you've got a really interesting story about that. But yeah, so people become a fan of a show. So they go, "Oh, I'm going to, excellent. My favorite podcast, and my friend Tom, who you think has released an episode." And as part of that, people like to become fans or feel familiar with what they're listening to. So they like segments to a show. So you and I are of a similar age. You probably used to subject your ears to Chris Moyle's Radio 1 breakfast show. And it had segments in it that you were familiar with. So you felt like a part of the gang. Right. So by creating consistent elements within your podcast, for example, let's do a quick fire 5 questions, the listener feels like they're part of the club. So by using that repetition, you can allow someone to become more integrated and part of your show and feel like it's something that they're super familiar with, and they feel like a super fan, and that buys their loyalty and therefore listenership and blah, 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 blah. So the answer to your question is I do think it is a good idea, but it ideally should be linked with your niche or specialism of your show, basically.
Okay, That's super good advice.
In your show, you at one point early on we were talking about you asking people like, give an example of when you've backed yourself or how have you backed yourself, or that was essentially the credential, right? Like I'm going to get people on the show who, like Emma, who she raised $500 million to start a fund. Like that is
it's much more than that now. Yeah.
She backed herself to go and she backed herself. How she was like 23 or something. She backed herself to raise $500 million to start a fund. That is that totally fits with the concept of the Back Yourself show. So telling those stories, those link together, and then I would know as a listener that everyone is telling a story about how they back themselves.
It's good, true.
Right?
It's absolutely true. I agree.
You also very early on, and this is one of the things that I like about an arc. You started out interviewing like you had your friend, I can't remember his name, but I can picture him, a sports person. So you had on like James and Ross. That's
Ross Nichols.
Ross. And
Ross superstar.
Yeah, Ross is a jiu-jitsu pro, and he backs himself. But then you found, as you interviewed a few more, that your niche would be investors and startups, that kind of thing. So you narrowed your audience as you went, right?
Yeah.
But through trial and error. So that leads me to another question for you, but I think it's a really interesting story for people. I think it's fair to say that you are a great example of someone who doesn't get what I guess could be perceived by many as a high listenership. You're not in the hundreds of thousands of listeners in an episode, but your podcast has been super powerful for you. So lots of people say, how can I monetize my show? Now, I know your story and I'm hoping you're going to share it a little bit, but like you have managed to use your show, monetize your show in quite a unique way. So not through sponsorships and ads, but it has really helped you in other ways. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think so it's interesting. It's an interesting byproduct. So it's never the intention with the show at all. The show was never intended to, it wasn't about my profile, which is insane because I'm incredibly vain. But I have another show which does that. Which also produced by OneFinePlay. Plug there.
I thought we were talking about your OnlyFans account. No?
I wish. If they're looking for people with receding hairlines, I'm the guy. So interestingly, never really considered it as a byproduct, but because I spent so much time talking to investors all the time, a lot of investors listened to the show and then they started looking at my company, Stakester, and as a result of that, we had a lot of people come forward and ask to invest in my personal business. Off the back of that. So there's definitely something about that for founders. There's a message there about profile raising, something that I hadn't really considered before as being important, but actually it's incredibly important. And it's very helpful that when you go into a meeting, when you're trying to raise money and someone says, oh, I know you, I recognize you from so-and-so, and you build out that network. That's one piece of just startup advice generally, not just about the show, something that comes out all the time on the show. Build your network before you need it. And this is a very serendipitous way for me to do it, which is good. It wasn't ever the intention, but it's an interesting byproduct. One interesting story that I love to talk about, actually, really quick while we've got a bit of time, is we have I think we have a great listenership, good numbers, as much as you burned me. But we have very niche orders. We
both know that's not true. I always tell people that one of the most amazing things about your listenership is that you could probably name half the people who listen to the show. So
maybe no, not half, not anymore. Maybe before, but I reckon. Okay. But I could tell you very specifically what type of person they were. Yeah.
Yeah, you could give a very clear demographic, whereas most people have no idea of people who listen to their show.
Yeah, and what's great, well, I'll tell you this really great story. We had a chap come on, a lovely guy. He did come on the show, listened to the show. And he started messaging me really early on saying, look, I really like it. It's really good. And he messaged me and he said, and actually he went on to start a business because of the show. He listened to the show and the format and the questions and the mistakes people made that actually inspired him enough, listening to the founders and the investors, to think he could go and do it himself. And the guy's just gone and closed his first round off the back of it. And That's really inspiring. And not only that, he's actually the third person to do that now, who credits having the confidence to go and start their business because of the show. And also some of the advice they've had on the show has helped them to improve their business. So that for me is a win. That's why we started this. And so you're super humbled to have people go out and do that. So because of that, we're just going to keep going.
That is an amazing impact to have had from the show. That people have actually, you've changed the course of people's lives in making your content. What another thing that I think is great about your show is, and I don't know if you did this intentionally, but you run a business called Stakester, which is essentially a gaming app. Is that right? You work in the esports community. Is that fair to say?
We're a competition platform.
Yeah. A competition platform.
It's for sports and video games.
Yet you decided to start a podcast, which was definitely as part of a growth mechanism for awareness, because you wanted to build community in advance of launching, but you didn't do it anything to do with the business, which is not a route that many people think of. Was there like a reason for that? Or was it accidental?
It was accidental. I think, it was like the philosophy that we have within the business of backing yourself is one that we all firmly believe within the business. That's not just a fluffy tagline. Like, we all believe in backing ourselves. We all believe that, that you should believe in yourself and have an educated guess about how you can improve and how you can win something. And you should put yourself out there. We firmly believe that, every single one of us. And I believe that about business as well. I believe that about starting business. I firmly believe you should control your own destiny. That's what we talk about in the show. And so the synergies were there for the philosophy. And quite interestingly, it finds that our community of listeners who use our app also are a similar community to some of those who listen to the show, because the philosophy and the mindset is exactly the same. It just happens to be in a different area than me beating you at a race of any kind, ever, any sport, no matter what it is. Yeah,
whatever. Except for me playing table tennis, which I'm still unbeaten at against you.
I don't.
No, I think you'll find that's true. Weird. You can't remember that.
I think you had some help with the chap who used to work for you, who's rather good at table tennis.
Well, I don't know. I can't remember. But the punchline here, back to podcasting, I think the punchline here is that there's a lot of power in making content based around your why and not your what. So that's essentially what you've done there, is that you've told a story based around your purpose, as opposed to the obvious. Like, we make quite a lot of stuff in the climate and social change space, and I think in the last 3 weeks I've had 3 people pitch literally the same concept to me, where they're going to interview people inside their echo chamber about whatever topic it is that they want to talk about. And it's very it's just simple. There's no integrity, there's no why, there's no exploration, there's no creative bravery. And so we're not involved in any of those shows. And we're working with them to try and change it. But what you've done, which is so great, which these people could learn from, is not look at the obvious thing, but look at something that actually you're passionate about and interested in and believe in, and is a philosophy behind why you're doing what you do, and tell that story. Because fundamentally, the listener is going to give you their time because they want to be entertained, educated, or inspired. And the inspiration thing is huge. So by having a conversation around the why is always going to be more interesting for most than the what. So what's next on the podcast? Anything I can help you with? Any questions on? Yeah,
so we've got series 2 just coming out, which were great. We sadly our former recording studio has disappeared, so we're now building it in our house. We have our own studio now, which we're very excited about. So that's good. We've got a good line of guests, which we're super pumped about. One thing, advice, this is just a small thing. I'm always looking for advice on what is the best transcription software, because transcription is such a pain. It takes forever. It's rubbish. I'm not going to do it myself. I don't have enough time. If you have any recommendations, please let me know.
I do have some recommendations. I think we're just still early in the transcription game. I think it's got a lot better. There are brands like Otter and Trint and Rev. I'm sure you have tried those guys. We're actually implementing the Google transcription service, so like direct from Google, and it's meant to be pretty good. So we're going to integrate that. I think they're still learning and developing. Currently, our system is to use, I think we're using otter.ai at the moment. And then we have someone who manually goes through and takes out a few of the amends that need to be made. I tell you, those transcription services, and I'm a stickler for punctuation because I have a dad who's an English teacher and I spot mistakes all over the place. Man, it just puts commas everywhere. If you leave a pause, it puts a comma. No current, like and comma. Why? Well, you've got a conjunction. You don't need that comma. Get out. It's terrible for that. But the other option is obviously to pay someone to do it. And there are some affordable, you can get it down to like 80 cents a dollar. Just depends on the volume, doesn't it?
80 cents a dollar? 80 cents a dollar?
80 cents a minute. 80 cents a 80 cents a minute.
It's amazing. I need to find this deal. 80 cents a dollar.
80 cents a dollar. Yeah, good. It's good.
Wow.
Yeah, 80 cents a minute. I know of someone on, I follow someone on LinkedIn who has a company called Stereotype, I think, and they're about that price. It's pretty good service because you're getting it exactly, aren't you? What are you doing with that transcription?
Just put it we're finding that it's really hard to tell. Like at this stage, when you're trying to get your listeners up through SEO and your standard promotion and so forth, you try my strategy with all these things, try and do everything pretty well. But as low touch as possible. And then when you realize what works, then double down on those efforts. And our ones that are just transcribed tend to perform a bit better than those that don't. And I guess it just improves your SEO because people find it, because it might have a question in there or whatever. So actually, it seems to make a difference.
It's a bit like you caught yesterday's episode of the Ask Me Anything, because we were talking about podcasting SEO and the importance of transcription and how the Google crawlers can then find it. And then before you know it, your podcast will be coming up top of the search results on Google, essentially like an audio blog post, because Google is now looking at podcasts. And if you've got the transcription, that's why you should make a blog post version of your podcast, because the crawlers are more likely to find that, which will then drive traffic. But I mean, you're getting into the depths of really looking far and wide. But yeah, the long and short of your transcription question is you've got to be patient for the AI to get better, I think. And also, not everyone has great, perfect diction like you, Tom. And
that is
one of the problems. One of the problems.
I do pause a lot, which is going to be an issue for commas.
Yes, it is. Luckily, because this is a daily show and we're just starting out, we aren't doing transcription. But thanks anyway. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time.
It's been great to be here.
It's been fun. I've enjoyed it. If you want to check out Tom's show, it's backyourself.show. No www. Apparently.
You'll probably get there, but I prefer the branding. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks better, right?
Lovely. Tom hosts his podcast, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, with Simplecast. Simplecast are my go-to for someone who wants a really easy solution for a podcast website. His website is just literally just a button press. You didn't really do anything. Did you?
I wrote some content. I wrote some content.
But it's a very easy solution.
It's super easy. Like, and for someone like me who is so tech lexic, it's insane. I set it all up by myself, and all the RSS feeds, all the connections to like iTunes and Spotify, all of that. Like, I did it, and I am the least technical person alive. Yeah.
As we found out trying to get you on this live stream. Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Connor, I will just wrap things up now. Unless, Connor, anything else you think I've missed? Anything important? No? Shaking your head? No, you're waving at me. Oh, okay, that's good. Guys, that was Tom from the Back Yourself. You could show. You can check him out on anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you're in the entrepreneurial space, it's definitely one to go listen to. Today's conversation was a little bit more ask me anything, but I think we're going to mix it up, keep it fresh, keep these conversations going. Hopefully you learned something about podcasting and potentially were inspired in some way. We'll be back on Monday, where I'm just going to be going through some of your questions, as I said. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, then live at OneFinePlay is where you can find us. You can also rewatch any of the previous streams on YouTube, where I would love it if you could also smash that subscribe button, leave us a comment, give us a thumbs up. Facebook, we've got a group and a page. If you go check out our content there, like that. You can find what we do for a business over at OneFinePlay.com. And I will see you on Monday.